I'm personally so blessed by the fact that I have a grandmother who's still alive, at least at the time I'm filming this, and may she live forever. I grew up with her, and my connection to her is so strong. One line of communication with her I've had now for decades since I went off to live on my own and get married has been cooking advice. Like, I remember calling her in my early 20s and asking her how to make a basic chili recipe, and she told me her way, and it was so fun. I was so proud of that chili. But I had a weird and painful realization recently that sort of jolted me awake to the way I use technology and the consequences it might have. The other day I was using an AI tool to coach me through a recipe I was making for dinner for my family, and I realized that this is the sort of thing I used to call my grandma about, and she would coach me through it. And in that sense, I lost that opportunity for connection with her, exactly her, on the phone in that moment. I can still call her anytime, I know. But sooner or later, I won't be able to just call her anytime. I won't have that. I won't have a chance to know and carry on her traditions in my kitchen. And though the AI tool did get me what I needed quickly and it worked really well, it wasn't my grandma. So I have an opportunity there to meditate on not just how good and fast my dinner was, but also about what parts of my heart and my life have been impacted by her presence alongside me. One thing's for sure, as a Christian, I can't just treat my technology use as some separate, up in the clouds kind of thing that has no impact on me personally, morally, ethically, in every way. My name is Brian Doak. I'm the Vice President for Digital Programs and Academic Innovation at George Fox University, where I've also been a professor of biblical studies for the past 15 years. Today, we're going to be talking about AI and the human future, particularly as we consider the basic ways that people of Christian faith can be thinking about AI specifically, but also just technology generally. And I want to be clear that if you're watching this and not a Christian, I think there are non-faith analogies or analogies from other religions that are parallel to some of the things I want to talk about here. So I really hope you'll still feel included on this journey. Okay, let's summarize a bit. What have we learned so far about using AI in a basic way? And how can we bridge that into some discussion about the kind of people we're becoming as we use these tools and move from competency with AI into real discernment about how to use it? By this point, we've maybe had our first complex or thoughtful interactions with a generative AI language tool. We've learned that you can pretty much use a tool like Gemini or Claude or ChatGPT right out of the box, no experience except knowing how to ask a simple question. But you can go beyond this to more complex things, right? Using AI tools to generate images in different styles and even short animations, avatars of yourself, film clips, charts, graphs. We can clearly see where this is going, right? In the future, entire films will be generated like this, and who knows, maybe you'll even be able to pay to insert yourself, your own image or your voice into one of your favorite historical films as the hero or some weird side character. We've also learned a little bit about how we can push our AI use beyond simple question and answer and into further iterations of a chat sequence, getting better and better results the more specific we are and the more we can clarify what it is we're after. All the major AI tools have functions where you can create a project to collect lots of different threads and chats and other uploaded information into one place. And this helps us as users better organize our work on the tool's interface, but also allows the tool itself to focus more powerfully and at longer length on some particular thing we're working on. And we've learned that these tools aren't perfect, right? There are issues of privacy, intellectual property. There are limits. Generative AI tools can only at this point really give us back what we collectively have put into them, even if it's true that what we get back sometimes feels and is very creative. What strikes so many of us is just how weirdly human the language is that comes out of these things. Is it more like a tool or a person? Should I be treating it like a person? I don't want to be rude to my AI chat partner, right? What about when AI says something odd, something off, or something factually wrong? This happens, but I've noticed, and many others have too, that there's something like a forgiveness gap when it comes to how we treat information from AI. It's like this. If you have a calculator that gives you wrong answers 2 or 3 out of every 100 times, what would you do with that? You'd throw it out immediately, right? Because calculators are supposed to be perfect. There is something like this with AI, but when humans fail, we immediately invoke emotional reasons for failure. He was trying, or she was having a bad day. So in that sense, we treat AI like a calculator. It's an answer machine and it better be perfect. But still, many of us do have an experience that talking with or typing with an AI is a lot like talking with a person. In his excellent book called Co-Intelligence, business and technology thought leader Ethan Mollick reflects on some of his interactions with AI chatbots and says that even though he knew he wasn't talking with a sentient being, it was still really difficult in the middle of the conversation to remember that he's not talking with a conscious, creative person. He speculates that treating AI like a person is more than a convenient fiction we may fall into. He thinks of it as something of a social and even psychological inevitability. Time will tell. Our experiences vary. We already know of cases where AI users have experienced something some call AI psychosis, that is, delusions and other intense experiences through which the user loses touch with reality. On the other hand, as reported in a really fascinating New York Times story called "To Stay in Her Home, She Let in an AI Robot," using a custom-designed AI chatbot as a conversation and medical companion in elder care situations where there are no other options, even to mitigate basic safety concerns, might prove to be a promising solution in really hard cases. And a case like that blurs the line, at least a little bit, between the person and the non-person. Given this complex relationship we're going to have with AI, and it will surely get wilder in the months and years to come, it's really worth it for people of faith to begin developing a larger level theological framework for how we're going to incorporate AI into our lives. So in light of that, I want to offer you 3 major categories of spiritual belief and practice central to any Christian's toolkit for dealing with the world, and certainly for dealing with technology. You can call to mind any or all 3 when thinking through tough AI-related questions. First, the Imago Dei, or image of God. The most foundational passage of Scripture thinking about the question, what is a human, comes in the Bible's first book, Genesis, in the very first chapter. So God created humankind in his own image, the text reads. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. In this first chapter, God had just gone through the creation of all kinds of amazing physical and creaturely realities, fish and birds, light and dark, land and sea. Humans alone, for whatever reason, we're not told, bear his divine image. Trees don't have it, AI doesn't have it. And what's more, in this same passage, humans are put into a position of organizational care over the created order. There is a hierarchy and a dignity to this leadership task that are undeniable for humans. And it seems right and foundational to affirm that we do not want to confuse what is human with human tools or simulations. One of the oldest and most important philosophical voices, not a Christian voice, a Greek philosophical voice, Plato, was also very concerned about this problem of simulation. The problem of what happens when we deal not with the real thing, but with a copy, or even a copy of a copy of a copy. In that game of telephone, things get distorted. Most of us have to admit, whether we're talking about AI or just texting or emailing, that many times it would probably be better for us to seek out more of our information face to face. Even better in a real relationship, and not just through words on a screen or AI summaries. Speaking of face-to-face, we now arrive at our second major concept, the incarnation. Simply put, this is the Christian belief that God, in Jesus, became fully human, took on a body, lived in a particular place in the 1st century AD, ate meals with specific people, got tired, got hungry. He was in every way here. The Gospel of John famously puts it this way, and the Word became flesh and lived among us. The word translated here as flesh, sarx in Greek, literally means something like meat at a meat market. And the Greek here for lived among us means something like pitched a tent or set up a tabernacle. These things are strikingly physical, right? Even weirdly physical. And whatever else this incarnation doctrine accomplishes theologically, one of the things it tells us is that God did not consider it beneath the divine nature to show up in a body, in a place, with these specific neighbors, with you and with me. Embodiment matters. Particularity matters. Being here matters. So when I think about my grandma and the recipe and the AI tool, I think part of what I'm reaching for theologically is that there is something irreplaceable about her actual voice in this real moment. A simulation, however good, is a different thing, even on a screen, right? And one of the gifts of the incarnation as a theological idea is that it gives us permission, actually a demand, to notice the difference and to be a little protective of the embodied, the particular, irreplaceable things in our lives, like our families, our churches, our neighborhoods, our friends, even as we make use of these tools. So when we consider technology, we can and must ask, is this teaching me the right lesson about the incarnation, about God's presence, God's here-ness here on earth in the bodies and voices of other people? Third and finally, vocation or calling. The Christian tradition has a really rich set of ideas about work and calling, going back to Scripture itself, but developed especially powerfully during the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s, where Martin Luther insisted that ordinary work, farming, parenting, baking bread, teaching, is a genuine calling from God, not just the work of priests and monks. Your work matters. The way you do your work matters. And the formation that happens through your work matters, meaning the person you become as you do it. This is where AI gets confusing, but also compelling, but in different ways. Because AI can do a lot of things for us. It can write our emails, write papers, summarize readings, generate images, arrange a meeting, and so on. That's wonderful and freeing, I have found, and continue to find almost every day. But sometimes the work itself is the very thing that forms us to the good. A student who never wrestles with a hard text might find that they haven't actually learned to think. That's going to be a problem. A parent who outsources every hard conversation to an AI script may find that the relationship hasn't deepened the way it would have if I just said the awkward, fumbling, real thing, just myself through my own words with no preparation. So one of the questions I find myself asking, drawing on this idea of vocation, is what is this AI use forming me into? Am I being shaped by my work, or am I outsourcing the very thing, the work that was supposed to shape me? Sometimes our answer will allow for an efficient, lightning-fast AI process. Sometimes it won't. And I can't tell you here in advance in which case is which. That's something you're going to have to live out. So I'm leaving you with this. Image of God, incarnation, vocation. 3 ancient anchors for thinking about a very new technology. You'll notice none of these gives us a simple answer, as I said, about how to use AI in any exact scenario. What these theological concepts do give us is a place to stand while we think. They give us reference points that won't move every time the technology changes, because the technology will keep changing faster than any of us can keep track of. Perhaps you'll be inspired to create rules of life, rules that you'll really stand by and use with regard to AI. These can be inspired by and infused by the theological ideas I presented here, or they could strike out in some totally different direction. Your rules could and probably should evolve over time. But having a practice, some standard, is something I've found can help keep me from being just blown away. Let me end with a couple of my own rules that I'm working on right now. These are literally real in my own life. 1, every morning, I read a small passage of the Bible and pray a prayer from a book of short liturgies before I ever touch my phone. No touching the phone before I do that. It's that simple. I do fail sometimes, but I do come back to the practice. Another one, I disclose my AI use in significant situations. I'm a professor, I'm an academic writer, and so far I've chosen never to use AI for my academic writing. I use it for ideas. I use AI for this very script to brainstorm, to think of more concise ways to say things, but ultimately my voice has to be my own voice. That's something I'm just committed to. Also, I commit to not using AI as a substitute for hard human conversations. This one's a little fuzzy, but maybe I'll use it to help me prepare, but not to replace the conversation itself with someone else's ideas. Similarly, I commit to not using AI to express things to loved ones that need to come from my heart, however inarticulate or awkward my heart is, for example. Like for a message in a birthday card to my daughter, or an anniversary note to my wife, which my 24th wedding anniversary is actually in like 3 days. Okay, so I have to get on that. The framework you build now and the practices you keep, these things will travel and grow with you. I wish you efficiency, strength, and growth in your AI use. I know I'm relying on these tools almost every day now, but I also need to know that there's a time to call my grandma and write the anniversary card.